Hey shooters, welcome to Photo School Day 1. We're here to break down the art of bike race photography frame by frame. No gatekeeping, just sharing the techniques and insights to help you capture the essence of speed and excitement. So, why are we here? Well, there's a lot of mediocre photography out there and I can't stand it. So, in the interest of no gatekeeping, I want to share the experience and what I've learned over the years, especially in sports and cycling photography. A lot of this is applicable to any outdoor sports, so just because you're not into cycling, keep watching. But my goal in this video and in the whole series is going to be to really help you elevate your photography game and make sure you're capturing those electrifying moments to do the sport justice. So today is all about gear. I'd love to tell you that gear doesn't matter, but really in sports photography, better gear is going to tend to get you better results. So today is all about selecting the best kit for your budget. So I'm not going to review or recommend specific cameras today. I'm really just going to try to give you an idea of the range of what's out there and how to think about what you need and hopefully what you can do with what you already have. So full disclosure, I'm a Canon shooter. I've worked my way through the range over the years from like a 60D, 70 Mark II, R6, R7, and now an R3. So I know that range really well, and that's my baseline. I'll definitely try to recommend some others in the Sony and Nikon range, but I just don't know them that well, so you'll have to do your own research. So let's start with the basics. The first decision you're going to make, crop sensor or full frame. Now maybe this is like a little bit of a religious debate to some people. Full frame is usually seen as better, but crop sensors can be much more practical, especially when you're carrying your gear around all day. You'll get a lot more for your money, it's lighter, so don't rule it out. Next, we're going to talk about considering a DSLR versus a mirrorless. Generally, I'm going to push you towards mirrorless. It is the future, and if it's within your budget, it's definitely the way to go for sports. But in the used market and on the budget end of things, DSLRs will get you a lot for the money. And of course, if you have a DSLR now, definitely keep shooting it until you find its limits. So pros of the DSLR range, you have an optical viewfinder, so there's no lag. You're generally going to have longer battery life, and you're going to have I'll say a larger lens selection, really probably a more economical lens selection, just because these lenses have been out there for so many years, and especially on the used market again, you're going to find a huge range for sale. Pros of the mirrorless, well, you're going to have an electronic viewfinder, and what that's going to give you is real-time exposure preview to really help you dial in that exposure. You're generally going to have something lighter and more compact. And for the vast majority of these, you're going to have a more advanced autofocus system. Even on the low end, you're going to have an autofocus system that outperforms some of the mid and top level DSLRs from, even just 4 or 5 years ago. Cons, you're tend to going to have a shorter battery life, again, especially on the lower end where for some reason they squeeze you on batteries and give you these adorable little batteries. And then you're probably going to have a higher cost for lenses and accessories just because, again, they haven't been out there as long. There's not as many third-party providers. But you can overcome that by either adapting older glass or just really being mindful about what you need today versus maybe what could wait. So with those two decisions made, let's talk about some other key features that are maybe a bit more specific to sports. And these are really the things that you want to consider when looking at individual cameras. We're going to talk about the frame rate, the autofocus performance, and the high ISO performance. So frame rate, you definitely want to ensure you don't miss a moment. Here you're going to be looking at how many frames per second the camera can shoot. So on the low end, or maybe at some older models, you're probably looking at 4 to 5 frames a second. That's definitely okay for casual shooting. In mid-range, you're going to get, up to that 9-10 second. And then if you look at kind of a more modern sports-focused camera or a very high-end camera from sort of the later DSLR years, here you're going to be hitting about 15 and going up to 30 and up from there into astronomical ranges. Really, once you hit kind of that 15 to 30 range, you're definitely in diminishing territory. But this is definitely a spec to pay attention to. Second is the autofocus performance. So again, you're going to improve your hit rate by being able to accurately focus on fast-moving subjects. So again, mirrorless is generally going to outperform a DSLR here, but the lens is going to make a difference in terms of having a faster lens. And you know, autofocus is a bit harder to quantify. So of course you can look at features like eye tracking, and the number of autofocus points, but really this is going to be a bit subjective. You're going to have to read some reviews and again do a little research. The third thing you're going to look at, the high ISO performance. So this is probably a bit different than some of the reviews you see talking about ISO in terms of pure low light capability. The difference here in the sports context is that you're really going to be pushing that shutter speed up to a thousandth of a second and maybe even beyond. So you're going to have to push the range of that ISO, particularly if you're shooting with maybe some budget lenses that aren't that great below f8 or so. So again, on the sort of the low end and some of the even up to mid-level DSLRs of yore, they're going to struggle past 1600 or so. That can be overcome with some post-processing now. Definitely not something you want to think about doing in volume, but again, if you're shooting kind of friends and family and only walking away with kind of 20, 30 photos you want to edit, you can consider handling that in post. But on the other end of this, if you look at kind of some of the sports-focused mirrorless cameras today, you're going to be able to shoot ISO 6400 all day long without thinking about it, and really no meaningful degradation in quality. So again, if these numbers don't mean much to you right now, we're going to have a primer on exposure in the next video that you're definitely going to want to watch. So now, kind of probably getting a bit more realistic in terms of camera categories and your budget. So we're going to kind of look at entry-level, mid-range, pro-grade, and what I'm going to call ultimate cameras. Again, these are just examples of kind of what you can get at the different price points. I'm not recommending these over anything else. All the brands have really great options today, so it's really hard to go wrong. But first, we're going to kind of look at the entry level. So here I would kind of look at like a Rebel T7i on the used market, on the new or refurb market maybe. The Canon R50 is a great value. And then the equivalent of that being like the Sony ZV-E10. All of these you can get for, I'll say $700 or so with a kit lens if you shop around a bit. Perfect for beginners, and also perfect if you are really just out to take kind of photos of family and friends. You don't need to shoot all day. You're going to get awesome results, but with a little preparation, because you're going to have to compensate just a little bit for that slower frame rate and maybe a little bit slower autofocus performance, but you're still absolutely going to be able to get good shots. Mid-range cameras. So here on the used market, I would look at like a Canon 90D DSLR. Compared to like the newer mirrorless Canon R10. I would also look at like the Sony Alpha, the A6400, kind of in this range. All of these are going to come in probably pushing about $1,000. You might be able to find a deal, but you're going to be pushing that amount. These are nice because all of these cameras are really great kind of all-purpose options. So if you're interested in other types of photography and just dabbling this, it's going to be something that's really solid for portrait, landscape, and anything you throw at it. But here you're going to be able to really start to have the ability to capture an entire race. And I would say, really think about getting shots that you can realistically sell. So if that's where you're trying to be, I would definitely start looking into this range. At this price point, I would say you're probably looking at crop sensors, which again, that's not a negative at all. It's going to save you on money and obviously on weight and probably on lenses as well. Next, we're going to be looking at what I'm going to call pro-grade cameras. So this, I'm considering like the Canon R6, the Nikon Z6, now the Mark II, soon to be Mark III. And I'm calling these pro-grade because these are going to offer features like dual card slots, in-body image stabilization, improved autofocus, and weather sealing, which is super important in this field. So this is really where I would say you need to be if you're taking kind of paid assignments where someone's relying on you to get photos of the race. I would definitely want to show up with a weather sealed camera and something with dual card slots and recording to both cards. The other wildcard option I'm going to throw out as what I consider kind of on par with some of those pro-grade cameras is the Canon R7. This is probably a bit debatable because the others I mentioned are all full frame, whereas this is going to be a crop sensor. But again, it's fairly well as far as weather sealing, dual cards. It takes the larger battery, so you can shoot maybe not an entire day, but you can definitely get through the day on 2 batteries. And I use this body personally, and I think it's a great body. It's a great value. and I shoot it up against my Canon R3 any day. Speaking of the Canon R3, this is where we get in kind of the range of ultimate cameras. So Canon R3, the Sony A9 III, these are for professionals who really need the best. So here you're getting really unmatched performance in autofocus, reliability, weather sealing, and battery life. Again, if you're watching photo tutorials on YouTube, probably not a range you need to be considering today. So body in hand, let's look at lenses. So I'm going to kind of talk through kind of the overall categories of lenses and again throw out some examples. So we're going to start on the wide end. So this is going to be something like the 15 to 30 if you're on full frame, or like the 10 to 18 millimeter zoom range if you're on a crop sensor. So these are very wide. Probably not the lens I would start with if you're just getting into the field. I think that it's a little harder to think about getting nice composition with these lenses, and it's definitely something you can get by without for a number of years. Where I would start is the next category, and this is looking at kind of standard zoom lenses, so like the Canon 24-105 or 24-70. And then on the mirrorless, there's like the 18 to 55 millimeter range. I think nearly every line has something like that. If you're on the crop sensor side of things. So this is going to be your everyday carry lens. It can cover a wide range of situations. You're going to want to have it in your bag for things like podium shots, crowd shots, and anything where you need to get in a little tighter, either because of restrictions or crowds, or just because that you want to capture some context in your images. And then from there, we get into the telephoto options. So telephoto is definitely, I think, what people think of when they think of sports photography. So here you can look at something like the 7200 or 7300, great options if you're on full frame. If you're on crop, this is actually where I think the benefits start to come in, because you can get a crop lens like a 55-250, or even just use a full frame lens like a 7200 and get really pretty amazing reach at a lighter weight. And a lower price point. If you're on full frame, you could consider going up to like a 100, 400, or 100, 500, but I would really see how far you can push some of those shorter focal ranges first to force you to kind of look at your composition and rely a bit less on that super telephoto look. Also on lenses, remember you can adapt older DSLR lenses to newer mirrorless bodies. It's a good way to either transition into mirrorless or get really more performance for less money. So we've got our camera, we've got our lens. Let's look at some kind of non-camera items. So first, how are you going to carry that? If you're carrying one body and it's relatively light, you can probably get away with the sort of OEM straps that kind of connect to each end of the camera. There's definitely a limit, number one, on how long you want to carry that comfort-wise, and two, when you start to get into maybe some heavier gear, how much you trust kind of those two little slider points where if either one fails, that camera's hitting the ground. So for straps, I use the Optech system that has 2 points of connection, and then there's a couple of different styles. There's sort of a sling, and then I have a double harness as well, both of which have 2 points of connection to the camera. Super comfortable and super secure all day. So I would look at that as kind of a point of comparison. They're actually really inexpensive for what they are. I think really it's on the lower end, and you can kind of spend as much up as you want from there. But the Optech system, great at least basis to look at and make your decision. Other gear, you're going to see people talk about tripods and monopods. I absolutely would not bring a tripod to a race. You want to stay mobile, and you're really just not adding anything to kind of needing to carry or set that up. A monopod, this I think can be helpful for like learning panning shots, and maybe until you get comfortable holding a camera fairly steady and being able to kind of pan with motion. But I would consider it a bit of a crutch, and not that you can't use it, particularly as you just want to start playing with lower shutter speeds, but it's definitely not a necessity either. Other items, filters. So these can be helpful in certain lighting situations. Not something you need in your bag on day one, but I'm just going to throw them out there as an option. So something like a circular polarizer can help reduce glare on a road, as well as maybe add some contrast back to the sky, which can be helpful. These are going to take about a stop of light, which is a good thing if you're trying to reduce your shutter speed, maybe to get some motion in there. Not great thing if you're really continuing to kind of push the limit on how fast you can shoot, because again, you're going to need to be shooting at a higher ISO to accomplish that. Again, next video we'll get into what that means and the effects of that. Other filters, a neutral density or ND filter. This will really let you start playing with those slow shutter speeds, particularly in super bright lights. So you can get some really cool effects in any lighting. But again, you might not be there yet in terms of being able to kind of get the full value of that, much less really need it. Other items, think about memory cards. Think about batteries. Just consider that you need double the batteries of whatever you think the baseline is. Memory cards, you can actually get away with a fairly small card, small meaning like 32 or 64 gig, but I would definitely look at the fastest cards that you can get for your budget. Even if you're exceeding what your camera needs to recommend, it's going to be a bit more reliable, and it's going to help you pull those images off faster. So at the end of the day, it's going to save you some time, and if you upgrade cameras later on that does require that faster speed, you're already going to have it. Last time I'll mention lens hoods. So useful for reducing flare, but it's also going to give you some protection. So you can get really cheap kind of third-party lens hoods if you don't already have one, or one didn't come with your camera. Just take a look at B&H or Amazon and search for your lens. You can find some really reasonable alternatives for $10, $15. Very cheap insurance. Just put it on and leave it on. There's really no downside to just having that little bit of extra length in your lens and that little bit of bumper when you're on day-to-day. So that was my rundown of all the essential gear for bike race photography. Invest in quality equipment, take care of it. And in the next video, we're actually going to dive into camera settings, start talking exposure, and really make sure that you're ready to use all that gear to capture every moment on race day. So thanks, and see you there.